Welcome to A Day in Her Life podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Rinnick, and I am fascinated by how other women make their days work. I am so excited for this episode with today's guest, Dr. Kathryn Boger. Kat is a child and adolescent clinical psychologist and co-founder and chief clinical officer of Sage Haus. She is also a newly published children's book author. I absolutely loved hearing from Kat about how co-founding a startup has changed her days and how the mission of helping kids, teens, and young adults with anxiety and OCD is so important to her. She also shares how that passion has led her to write a children's book, Step by Step, which is available now, and I absolutely loved reading with my son. Kat also shares how exercise is her oxygen mask and how she loves a well-salted bath at the end of the day once her 3 boys are asleep. I truly love chatting with Kat about how she manages her days and enjoyed hearing about how she and her husband spend their Friday nights with their boys. Thank you so much, Kat, for being a guest on today's episode. It was such a treat to hear about your days. And thank you. As always, thank you for being here and sharing a part of your day with A Day in Her Life. If you like what you hear, please share the podcast with a friend and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also be the first to hear about new episodes and get them directly to your email on Tuesday mornings by subscribing to the Day in Her Life newsletter on adayinherlife.com. I am so grateful that you're here and I know that you're going to love this episode and hearing about Kat's days. All right, let's have some fun. Hi, Kat. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Ellie. Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so excited for you to be here. So, Kat, would you mind setting the scene and telling us about who you are, where you live, what your family looks like, and how you got to be here?
Sure. So I live in Lincoln, Mass. We used to live in Cambridge, but then with each successive child, we've moved further and further into the boondocks. So now we have deer in our backyard and we're living the country life. I live with my husband, my 3 boys, ages 4 and 8 and 11, our au pair, and also our 2 dogs and our cat. And believe it or not, we are contemplating getting a second cat and then also maybe adding fish to the mix in case, we don't have enough action in our household. But professionally, I am a child and adolescent clinical psychologist. I spent most of my career working in academic medicine at McLean Hospital, Harvard Medical School. And then 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, my colleague, who is a child psychiatrist and also a mom, and we took the plunge and we co-founded a pediatric behavioral health company called Sage Haus, which was a big jump for us. So the focus of our company is providing access to evidence-based, which means research-backed, and insurance-based treatment for kids and teens and young adults who have anxiety and OCD. So often what you see in the field is that it's very hard for families to get treatment that is both research-backed and covered by insurance, which is really sad. And it is what compelled us to start this company and do something very different. I feel very strongly about the mission, which is what compels us. And then I also just published a children's book called Step by Step. It's my very first book, and it's about taking steps to do things that feel scary and new.
I love that. I'm so excited to order the book and read it with my kids.
Oh, great.
So, Kat, let's go through a day in your life. If you wouldn't mind, take us through your morning. How does that look from waking up to kind of getting the kids out the door?
Yeah, and if I'm being fully honest, I think I have a little imposter syndrome in answering this question because the commentary that comes into my brain is like, who really cares what a day in Kat Boger's life is? But then what I remind myself of is that I'm actually fascinated to know how other women spend their days. And so I'll walk you through it. But so let's see. So, I'm not a morning person. Mornings are harder for me. I wake up with the kids jumping on me. My kids are all early risers and they're just like full of fire in the morning. We used to do I don't know if you've ever seen those like green light, red light clocks, and they couldn't leave the room until it was a green light. Now they can tell time. They're a little bit older, but still they have to wait till 7 a.m., which is like their like metaphorical green light until they can leave. And then they just come running into the room and jump on me. So that's my wake up. And then the kids get themselves dressed. So our kids are the kids that are a little rough around the edges, mismatched, a little wrinkled in their clothing. But that's actually very purposeful because we think it's good for them to sort of take responsibility for themselves and sort of build confidence that that's a task that they can manage on their own, even if they're the kids who have holes in their socks sometimes. And then we all have breakfast together. Breakfast is never anything fancy. It's like cereal, frozen pancakes, try to mix in a little bit of fruit, something healthy in there. Kids at this point are like just running around loud, punching each other. And I am still waking up. So it's like, it's a process throughout the morning. And then my kids and my husband, they actually leave now. This is the first year where all three kids are in school together. And my husband's a teacher at the same school. So this year they all leave together at 7:45. And this is like game changer status for us because having them all move in the same direction versus the younger one headed off to preschool in a different direction at a different time, it's been really, really nice for all of us. And our youngest is just thrilled now to get to go to school with his big brothers and his dad. So they all head out at 7:45. And then this is when I have a little time for myself. So I use the next 25 minutes, it's always 25 minutes, for exercise. And exercise for me, this is my oxygen mask. And it is really how I kind of like regulate my nervous system every day. And so I try to exercise pretty hard. I'm like the middle-aged woman who's running around the neighborhood, literally like doing sprints, coaching myself, being like, you got this, and running as fast as I can. But I really do notice a difference in my day if I exercise hard in the morning. And then after I've exercised, I have a little breakfast. I love coffee, but coffee does not love me. So it does not agree with my stomach. So instead I drink chai tea lattes every morning. I've discovered a company called Chai Box. And so I mix a little bit of chai box and oat milk. And it's like my really favorite, aside from coffee, drink. And in the winter, you can warm it up. In the summer, have it cold. And then I'll have some eggs, toast, yogurt, granola, something like that. And then I'm getting dressed. And if I'm being totally honest, for me, getting dressed is like both getting dressed and ready and then checking Slack and writing some emails and sometimes making work calls. It's sort of a multitasking time because the day is already gearing up. I wish I could say I was like in a Zen mode listening to peaceful music while I'm getting dressed, but that's not me. And then my workday starts. So I have to say I'm pretty lucky because I work virtually, but our house has a barn next to it. And so the barn is my office. So I actually get to quote unquote like walk to work, but it's all of a 10-second walk. And then I have my own space. And that's been really nice since we moved to Lincoln. And then I'm pretty much in meetings all day, virtual meetings. And usually it's either half an hour or hour-long meetings, and it's pretty back to back. I'm someone who can hyper focus. And so I can like just be in the zone and I forget to get up and use the bathroom or do stretch breaks, eat lunch. So I have to like actually purposely remind myself. Sticky notes. My watch is now set to give me a reminder. And then at the very end of the day, I also take a few minutes for myself because that transition, like I used to commute in the car when I was working back in the day in person. And that was sort of like a natural transition from work to home. And now it's like I could just go right from my last virtual meeting into the house and the kids are just like, mommy, mommy, mommy. And so I need something to transition. So I try to be purposeful about how I navigate that. Sometimes I'll listen to like a song. I'll do a little bit of mindfulness. I always, when I walk in the door, after, of course, I give the kids hugs and we talk about their day, I always actually change my clothes because that's like a signal to my brain that, okay, I'm now switching gears from like work mode into home mode. And I think that helps me transition a bit.
I love that. I actually was thinking, I was talking with someone about this the other week, and I was thinking about this and how I used to come home from work and always just like change my clothes into like lounge wear when I got home from work when I was commuting, and how like A, I had a lot more laundry, but B,
it's true.
I also it was a very like it defined that period of time, or like that shift between the two personas, if you will, or whatever. And I was thinking back and I was like, oh, my mom used to do that too. Like I remember my mom would always put on like bike shorts and like a big t-shirt when she got home from work. She used to work in an office as well. And I was like, huh, interesting. And now I'm always just in loungewear, and I don't have, but that's an interesting way to do it.
You know, there's also something to be said for wearing loungewear 24/7 too, because it's so cozy and nice.
And also the like, what is it, like the clothes mullet that you can wear now, like business on top, party on the bottom.
That is true. I will say during the workday, I do wear slippers every day. Like the few times I have to go in person, I'm like, what am I going to put on my feet? I can't fathom not wearing my slippers during the workday. So you can cheat too.
Exactly. What time do you typically wrap your day, Kat?
I would say, I mean, it sort of depends how you define wrap your day, but the official workday ends typically around 6:30, although it varies day to day. I'm not going to lie and say that's it for work. I do get on work later after the kids go to bed, but that's sort of like the official end point usually.
So like 6:30 is when you head back from the barn to the house.
Exactly. That's like my mindfulness activity that then, leads me back to the house. Yeah. And that's when, typically when I'm walking in the door is when we're starting to like gear up for dinner. We do try to have a sit down dinner together every night. That's something that's really important for our family. I love time sitting around and talking with the kids about their days. We try to do appreciations where everyone has to go around and say the 3 things they've appreciated from the day. For some reason, we never sit in the dining room. We always sit like hunched around the kitchen counter on stools and someone's standing. But I think that's like one of the best times of day. It's now that my 2 older kids are playing travel sports, it's going to cut into those dinners. So we're going to have to figure out how to navigate that this year. But historically, that's been a really nice time for our family, something I look forward to every day.
And I think we talked about this earlier, but how do you cook, or does your husband cook, or do you guys use, I think you guys mentioned you love Wico as much as we do.
Yes, love Wico. It's sort of a dangerous discovery because we started with like 1 day a week, and then we moved into 2 days, and then we slipped into 3. We may or may not be on the 4 train. It's a very slippery slope. And then I discovered that they also do breakfast. So yeah, it's really nice though, I will say, after a long day to be able to, and it's such a privilege to be able to use Wico, but to be able to just like appreciate the time with the kids as opposed to like coming in and then immediately switching gears and figuring out how to like cook a fresh meal. It's like one way that I cut corners so that I can really just appreciate the time with my husband and my kids at the end of a long day. Yeah.
Love that. And then after dinner, what does that time frame look like for you guys?
So after dinner, we do a family cleanup. The kids all have jobs. So and it's sort of like a rotational schedule. So somebody's vacuuming, someone's doing the dishwasher, someone's doing the counters. My 4-year-old loves to organize shoes. So his job is to take all of our shoes and line them up. And I think this is just another way to just teach our kids about responsibility and that they're a part of pitching in this family. It gives them a little bit of ownership and appreciation for, more appreciation for the meal if you then have to be responsible for cleaning it up. It definitely can be a little messy or rough around the edges when, the dishes get chipped or dropped or, something like that happens at least once a week, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere recently, and I'm sure you've heard of this, that like having chores around the house helps with responsibility and like long-term child success. I don't know how true that is. As a expert, you might know, but I've heard that really can help.
It's actually something that we work with families on in our treatment protocol, which is something called autonomy granting. This idea that even from a very young age, you can teach kids and give them responsibilities for these life skills, and that it's so important in helping them build confidence, navigate challenges, bumps in the road, navigate making mistakes. And the parent's job is to provide the right scaffolding and then to step back and let their child sort of struggle through it. The analogy actually that we often talk about is, the road of life is really bumpy. So we're all going to encounter pain. We're all going to encounter bumps. And as a parent, our options are to either go in and smooth out all the bumps, so prepare the road for your child, or you can prepare your child for the road. And so helping empower them to take on responsibilities, to do things on their own, to not, when they're struggling with their homework assignment, not jump in and take over, because then they're not actually learning how to navigate bumps. And yes, they may get a worse grade, and that's for a parent to step back and have to tolerate.
That's really cool. You're such a wealth of knowledge on these things. This is so cool.
Well, I will say it's a lot more humbling as a parent trying to live these things than trying to teach them. So being a parent's hard.
Yep. So after family cleanup, what do you guys do? What does it look like for you guys?
It depends on the night. Sometimes we often listen to music while we're cleaning. And so sometimes that'll turn into like a little mini dance party, and we'll do some dancing in the kitchen, blow up a little steam that way. Sometimes, our 8-year-old will have a little bit more homework, so they're helping with homework. And then the kids always take a bath every night. This is not so much about cleanliness. I mean, it's nice that they get clean, but it's really about, like, for them, that's like their transition from really active day into like settling down for the night. So there's a lot of like splashing and playing in the tub, but by the time they come out of the tub, they're generally a little bit more settled. And that's how we transition into like reading time. And then like our 4-year-old right now is super into like superheroes. 8-year-old is very into Calvin and Hobbes. So we do some family reading, and then get at least the 2 youngers go to bed first. And then the older one goes to bed a little bit later.
And then what do you do after the kids are asleep?
Well, by the time all of them are asleep, I take a slow breath. And I'm like, we made it, another day. And then I hop back on my laptop. So I usually have a couple more hours of work to do at night. So working in a high growth startup, it's a lot. Yeah. And so a couple more hours of work. Usually my husband is grading at that point. And then at the very end of the night, one of the things that I always do is take a bath. I will pour massive amounts of Epsom salts in the bath. I actually will use like a full bag. I use the Dr. Teal's eucalyptus and spearmint. That's my go-to. And that's just like the time just for me. It's quiet. And I know nobody is going to come in being like, mommy, 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 I need this. And so I look forward to that time every day. And it's like my way of transitioning and kind of unwinding after a long day. And then after that is sleep. Sleep is really important to me. I'm not a great sleeper. And so when I go to bed, I'm like locked and loaded. I have earplugs, I have an eye mask, I have a mouth guard. It's like super, super sexy, but I do everything I can. We have shades, white noise, like really try to prioritize getting some sleep.
That is one of my biggest triggers. If I am not well slept, everything falls apart around me, and I can't keep my cool.
I'm 100% the same way. It's like my 2 vulnerabilities are you really hungry right now? Are you really tired? And or have you not exercised? That's a third one. And those 3 are like a bad combination together. And so
anything that your husband can do to support that, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's better for everyone in every regard.
Exactly. And my kids are the same way. And so it's like, we all need these sort of like basic things just for the household to run a little bit more smoothly.
100%. If my kids haven't slept, I can tell, even if they seem slept enough, I can always tell if they haven't gotten their full doing of sleep.
Oh yeah. Me too.
You mentioned that you have an au pair. Would you mind talking a little bit about how you came up to have an au pair? I know Julia, who connected us, also has an au pair, but
Yeah.
would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, our au pair is wonderful. We adore her, and she is like a part of our family. She helps us in so many different ways. So she's been with us for the last year plus, and then we also have had other au pairs in the past. We used to, when our oldest was really young, have a nanny, and then we found that we just needed more flexibility, and it was hard because as we added kids to the mix, we just needed, like, there are a lot of last minute things that would come up. Someone would get sick or something would get canceled, or we would have an extra work obligation. And so it's been really nice to just be able to, we do plan, like every Sunday we set a schedule for the week, but having our au pair live in our house has just been nice. It's like an extra layer of support at any given time.
That's awesome. And is your au pair, does she speak a different language or expose your kids to a different language right now?
Yeah, so she speaks Portuguese, and our youngest can speak little bits and pieces of Portuguese, so which is a real gift for him.
That's so cool. Obrigado, right? Isn't that thank you?
Yeah.
My dad's big thing was always know how to say thank you in a ton of different languages, so that if you notice someone saying something in a different language, even if you don't know anything, you could say thank you.
I love that. You can express appreciation in every language. That's
about
great.
12, I think, is where we learned. What does a typical schedule look like right now for you using your au pair?
It's different this year than last year because our youngest is now in school with the older kids and my husband. But typically she helps out in the early morning and then helps with sort of like breakfast cleanup and some laundry in the morning when the kids have gone to school, and then is helping in the afternoon with school pickup for our youngest. So our older two go to my husband's soccer practices. My husband's a soccer coach too. My oldest is on the soccer team. The middle considers himself to be sort of like a co-coach of the team. But the youngest is not ready. He can't hang yet at the practices. So she picks him up. And then she is going to help this year with a lot of driving and coordination with all the practices that we're bracing ourselves for with all the travel teams.
Yeah, I can imagine. It must be fun to see your kids excel in a sport, but also it's a lot of driving. And even with my toddler activities, I'm like, we got swim at the same time as hockey. And so two different directions.
Totally. Well, the weekends come and my husband and I are like, all right, see you Sunday. It's like divide and conquer, and we're just driving in different directions all weekend. It's a lot. And I mean, the kids love it so much that it feels worth it, and it doesn't leave as much room for downtime as I think would be nice.
Talking a little bit about your workday, how do you structure your workday? You mentioned a lot of meetings. Do you try to front load certain types of meetings, or do you even have that flexibility? I know sometimes working with clients that can sometimes go out the window pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we have open calendaring in our company. And so people can schedule you for meetings, but you can also block off time. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is block off a certain amount of time for asynchronous work. So to be able to move bigger projects forward in the week. But then the rest of the calendar is pretty much fair game. I'm not really seeing patients at this point. It's more sort of like an admin role. But you really, like, within the parameters of your outlined workday, you can kind of be scheduled at any time for various meetings. And the half an hour meetings, those are the ones that really get you because there don't tend to be the break in between the half an hour. So you could have a series of just like back to back to back half an hours. And those are the times I really do need to be deliberate about getting up and like taking a little bit of a move or stretch break.
I totally understand that. And the context switching too can be pretty tough in that regard.
Yeah. One thing actually that I have found to be a real game changer is walking meetings.
Hmm.
So I started doing this when I was working in person at McLean, but what I would do is keep sneakers under my desk. And then when I had one-on-one meetings, my colleagues and we would go outside and we would walk around the reservoir and we would do all of our work together in that meeting, but we were getting fresh air. And in the virtual context, you can do that just by talking by phone. And I do think it's like a reset for the rest of the day and can be really helpful when you're otherwise just staring at a screen.
Yeah. How often do you go into the office, would you say?
We don't actually even have a physical space. And so we kind of rotate at different houses or settings. So I would say probably like once a month we get together in person.
I also don't have a physical space for my company right now in the Boston area, but it is so nice to have that face-to-face connection monthly at least. I think some of
Yeah.
my coworkers get together a little more regularly, but it's tough with kids.
We actually have twice a year, we have a full company in-person retreat, and ours is coming up in a few weeks, and it's amazing. You get to see all of these people in person, and there's just something about that like team building in person that is hard to capture virtually. So we're all really excited for that.
That must be really fun. And especially in a growth startup, having those, I feel like, relationships when you're failing fast and having, what do they call it? It's a lot easier to give each other grace when you have that personal connection in those
Yes.
moments of stress.
Yes. And to like really know each other as a human being, I agree. And like build that foundation of trust so that when stress gets high or things get, more challenging, that you can lean on one another. I totally agree.
So, how do you stay organized? So, how do you organize both your family and yourself? Do you use Google tools, regular calendaring for work, or do you use different, either virtual or like a physical calendar at home?
I would say organization in our household is a continual work in progress, particularly as the kids get older and now have their own activities. I would say we work really hard to set a schedule. Every Sunday we sit down. It's like, I actually dread the activity for some reason, but it's a necessity. So we sit down, my husband and I, and just like map out the week and all the different pieces and who's getting what birthday gift. And, it's like, I think I dread it because it just feels like a million pieces that all like this huge jigsaw puzzle that all has to come together. And inevitably one or two pieces drop a week. And, I tend to be somewhat of a perfectionist. You know what? I'll take out the someone. I tend to be a perfectionist. And so I think that I'm really working on just tolerating the dropped pieces and accepting that that's just going to be a part of our reality with both my husband and I working and 3 kids and a busy household. But we use a Google Calendar. It is like our source of truth in the household. If it is not on the Google Calendar, it literally does not exist for all intents and purposes. And we have it like color coded. So doctor's appointments are blue, fun activities are purple, like the routine activities are pink, and you got to get the color coding right, and you got to share the calendar event with, with the other person. So that's kind of like how we keep all the pieces together.
That's great.
And then drop pieces, but yes.
That is a good activity though, to have as painful as it is, to have a weekly touch base on those types of items.
I think so. And I think that the other thing we try to do when we sit down is just sort of talk about, okay, like what worked well last week?
Mm-hmm.
Where did we feel like, wasn't working as well? How can we adjust this coming week? So it's also sort of like some brainstorming too about how to continually maybe drop fewer balls or at least tolerate the balls dropping.
I love that. Speaking of time with your husband, how do you make time for your relationship in a given week?
Well, the two of us work really hard I shouldn't say we work really hard too, but like we're very purposeful about planning date nights. We even like, for example, at the height of COVID, the two of us would go to my office because we couldn't really go anywhere. And we would just like escape to the office and do takeout and watch a movie together. And now that we're like freed from the height of COVID, we'll, go out to dinner, go to the movies, but really love having that time, just the two of us. We sometimes will play tennis together. I'm wildly erratic in tennis, but we're both really competitive. And it's just like a fun thing that we can do together and also get exercise. And then last fall, actually, it was our anniversary and two of us went away for 2 nights together. It was our first time going away for more than one night. And it was incredible. And so I think we're going to try to make that a tradition.
That's awesome. And then similarly for your friends, how do you make time for your friends? You sound like you have an incredibly busy schedule, but how do you make time for your friends in a given week or even a given month, as we know that it can sometimes spread out?
Well, one of the things I like to do is to meet my friends to exercise. So we'll like meet for a walk or a run. Actually, on Saturday mornings, have been meeting one of my friends at the track, and we will just like run sprints together or go for a run. And it's a real twofer because we get to just exercise and hang out with one another. And it also sort of like sets the tone for the rest of the weekend when we're then moving in a million directions with all the sports games. Sometimes I'll meet friends for dinner on a weeknight, but I'm an introvert. And so at the end of a long day of back-to-back meetings, I'm honestly just like wiped out and really depleted. So oftentimes I also have to think about how do I just like build in time just for myself too, which is where my bath comes in every night. It's just like my quiet time. It's funny because that same friend who I meet at the track, after a long day for her, she is an extrovert and she's like hungry to engage with people and to go out in the world. And I'm the opposite. After a long day, I'm like, and now I need quiet. So I do think it's important for us to understand what our unique needs are too, and how to accomplish, how to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. What else do you do in the day for yourself? Is really the bath, or like what do you do in the bath? Just kind of zen? Do you read, listen, watch anything?
It's a good question. So ideally, I'm just like zen and maybe listening to music or a podcast. So that happens sometimes. Sometimes I'll watch a show. Sometimes, if I'm honest, I'll do a little work in the bath. Yes. Sort of depends on like where I am. But even if I'm like doing slacks in the bath, I do try to have some time that's just like quiet and for myself. And I crank the heat way up. So it's like being in a hot tub basically. And I just lie back and I could be in there for like a good 20 minutes or so.
Wow. That sounds so enjoyable. Makes me want to go take a bath.
It is. My husband has this dream that someday we'll get a hot tub, but this is like the placeholder for the someday hot tub.
Have you seen those inflatable Coleman hot tubs?
My sister actually has one. It's fantastic and she loves it.
Gee, thanks. I bought that. Talks about it all the time. Like always posting about it. I think she bought it during COVID. I think it's Caroline Moss and she talks about it all the time.
Amazing. I may have to look into that myself. Yeah.
They're always on sale on Prime Day.
Huh. The first thing that pops into my head with 3 boys is that within like 30 seconds, someone will be like, look, Mom, I popped it. So if there's a way to pop it, they'll find it.
That does seem like a very, very good activity for them.
Yeah.
So how do you make time for creativity in your day?
That's a good question. I think that I love working virtually. I think there are a lot of benefits. I also think that what has been lost is the white space time of driving, that it used to be that while I was driving, I could just sort of zone out and do some of my like most creative thinking and just kind of let my brain go. And I do miss that. Mm-hmm. I think things that I do during the week for creativity, one is just like cooking and baking. I'm not cooking the dinners on the weeknights, but on the weekends I'll cook dinner, and then we do a fair amount of baking. We had a tradition called Friday Pie Day, where each Thursday night the kids and I would bake a pie, and we had to think of a new kind of pie each week. And there are only so many kinds of pies out there, so it did take some creative energy to try to figure out which pie we would make. So that was really fun. I think The challenge was that the kids then discovered that ice cream pie could be a kind of pie, and that each week they would rotate the kind of ice cream. And so then Friday morning for breakfast, they were eating ice cream. So we had to shift that. So then we actually turned it into Friday Try Day, where every Friday we had to try something new. But we kind of ran out of new things to try. So we're currently looking for a new creative tradition. So if you have any ideas, I'm definitely open to them.
That's such a cool idea. And did the kids help you cook too?
Yes, they did. And I will tell you, some of those pies were a little, twice the flour or whatever the ingredients, twice the sugar. But no, I think they liked it so much because they felt like it was something that they had created. So they were really proud of it, and they got to eat it for breakfast Friday. So that was also really exciting for them.
We did a pizza. My husband and I used to make pizza every Friday during COVID and got very into it and had our like perfect recipe for the crust and whatnot. Fell apart after a while, but the other day I made pizza for dinner and I let my son decorate the pizza. He could do whatever he wanted on the pizza. And then last night, just out of the blue, he's like, "Mom, can you talk me through how I made pizza again? I really want to do that again." And I was like, "Okay." And because he probably would have turned his nose up had I just served him the pizza, but because he made it and he made a truck on it, it was his pizza.
Wow. That is creative that he pulled off a truck on a pizza.
A rectangle of cheese was the truck. But he loved it. So you could turn Friday Pie Day into a pizza pie.
I like that. It's a good way also to get the kids to actually eat their meal and something healthy. So that's great.
I think we might try to turn that into a new thing over the winter again, just because it's an easy, what's going to be on the menu for one night a week, and then you can handle that.
Totally. And you can experiment with different toppings and different vegetables, and it's a way to sneak in different vegetables.
Yep. Which my son ate 3 cucumbers yesterday. I don't think he's touched a cucumber in months, but then just was eating them with ranch. This is the most delicious thing ever. I was like, whatever, just do it.
Whoa,
just do it.
That feels like a huge victory. Yeah, I would be thrilled.
Take it. Have fun.
Exactly.
I'm not going to say anything.
That's awesome.
So tell us a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. I'd love to hear more about how you came to writing a children's book and how that developed.
Yeah, well, so that's a good question. So this was in the height of COVID, and it was before the startup. And so it was during a time when we just sort of had more downtime because we were hanging out in the house for long stretches. And I have, for a long time with the work I do, felt really passionate about getting across the message of having supporting kids, or the importance of supporting kids in facing things that feel scary, that feel hard. And I think parenting kids, and particularly kids who have anxiety, it can be really counterintuitive because so much of being a parent, our instinct is to protect and to take kids away from things that are hard and scary. And I think particularly for kids with anxiety, and again, this is the population with whom I've worked for years, is, we know that where there's anxiety, there's avoidance. So for this population, when they avoid, they actually get some relief. But the more they avoid things, the bigger the anxiety grows. And so I felt really interested in how to get out the message early that, number one, it's important to face things that are scary and hard so your brain can learn that you can handle it. And that as a parent, your job, as counterintuitive as it feels sometimes, is to both validate your child's emotion. So let them know that you hear them, that their emotion is real, that it's understandable, and encourage them to take steps to do the hard thing. So I wanted to find a way to get that message across. And then one day, my husband, again, during COVID, my husband was taking the dogs to the vet. And I was just sort of sitting there and started writing out this rhyme. And it was a rhyme about a kid who was scared to do things, and his mother was encouraging him. And so I wrote this whole book in rhyme and got pretty excited about it, and worked on multiple drafts. And then I submitted it to a publisher. And what I didn't realize is that when you go to publish a book, it's a pretty extended process. I think I'm right now in the world of startup where things move very quickly.
Yeah.
But here I am 3 years later, and now the book is coming to fruition. But what was interesting is that actually the feedback I got was that I should take the rhyme out. So at the end of the day, most of the rhyme ended up coming out of the book. But the message remained. And then I was able at the end of the book to write a note to parents to give even more information about sort of how to help a child navigate things that feel scary and new. And, I think having 3 kids myself and having watched their journey, that being a kid is hard and you're encountering new things all the time. And if you have a more anxious temperament, these things can feel really scary, and it's very tempting to just avoid and to stay away. And so, again, my hope is that kids from a young age will read this book and get excited about, or sort of empowered about, trying things that are new and feel a little bit scary, to see that they can actually do it and maybe even enjoy it too.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to read it with my kids.
Thank you.
So you co-founded a startup. This must take up a ton of your time, both like mentally in a day and emotionally. Can you talk a little bit about how that, like, moving from McLean and kind of the non-startup world to the startup world has kind of shifted your days, your need for like you time, if you will? Like, how has that shifted your structure?
Well, I will say it's been a big transition and a steep learning curve. I feel very lucky, though, that in our company, one of our mottos is never worry alone. And we just have a really wonderful team of people, just great human beings. And I always feel like I can lean on them, and that I'm also learning a lot from them. So I feel very grateful for that. And I feel like it's as if someone just cranked up the volume of my professional life times, I want to say 10, but maybe 20. My husband may say 50. So I would say just the days are a lot more intense. The days are longer. I also have to squeeze in some work on the weekends. It's just a lot more work. And so I think that one of the things that my husband and I did at the start of this was we sat down and said, if I'm going to do this, we're going to really have to figure out division of labor between the two of us and how to make our household continue to run as I'm going to be pulled away more and more. And so my husband has been stepping up in countless ways. He's a really amazing person. And so I would say that his load in life has increased exponentially in this too. And that's where too on Sunday, I think, like our Sunday planning sessions, we're continually checking in about sort of like who's carrying what and how sort of that balance is going. I feel lucky too. He, as a teacher, doesn't work in the summer. And so he can sort of navigate the kids and all the different pieces there, which has really helped. And I think that the other piece, and this, to be honest, is a work in progress, is that I just have to be a lot more planful about how to take care of myself. I think that, I think as working moms, there's like that inherent guilt. And I think that it's like anytime I have a free moment, my brain goes to, well, what can I do for the kids? Or how can I, help someone else in the family? And I think in order for me to be my best self and for me to be a better mom, I also have to just think more deliberately about what I can do to take care of myself.
Absolutely. And the work that you're doing is so meaningful and impactful. Having worked in some mental health programs in the past, like the need is there. And I'm really excited to continue to read more about it.
Well, and I think that is one thing that's really helpful, is having that mission of being able to just help more kids and help more kids get care that works. And so having that North Star, even on the hardest days, I think kind of like just recenters you and re-energizes you.
I think I've always, for a long time, worked in healthcare startups, and I feel like that's kind of the thing. Like, the startups are so hard. They're part of you have to love that frenetic energy and love that like get it doneness, and having that kind of mission driven purpose makes it a lot easier too.
Yeah,
I love that.
Couldn't agree more.
So Kat, what is your favorite part of your day?
Can I cheat a little bit in my answer?
Absolutely. There are no rules.
Okay. I would say the tweak, this is my cheat, is that my favorite part of the week is Friday night movie night. So on Friday nights, we all get home, we order takeout, we watch a family movie together. Although these days there's a lot of like negotiation over what movie that will be because it has to please an 11-year-old and a 4-year-old and then the 8-year-old in the middle. But then after that, the kids actually have a sleepover on our floor of our room. And, you know, I know with a kid who's 11 is like, you know, in that tween mode, heading headfirst into the teen years, that this is not going to last long. And so I really try to savor these nights. I appreciate them so much.
That's so special. They must love that.
They do. They do. I'm just scared for the day that they don't and they're like too cool for school, but I'll take it for now because they do love it.
What is a ball that you let drop or something that you're consciously deprioritizing right now just because it doesn't fit in your life with everything you have going on?
Well, I'm not on social media aside from LinkedIn. And I used to be, for example, on Facebook, and then I just found that it was like a huge time suck and it didn't make me any happier. So no social media. And then I also don't talk on the phone socially. The only time I do is like if I'm in a long car ride. But as I said before, I'm an introvert. And so between work and the kids, I'm often just kind of wiped out. And so I don't actually crave time on the phone. I would much rather catch up with people in person.
Mm-hmm. I feel very similarly. I feel terrible that I never call my friends, but at the same time, I'd much rather see them in person.
Totally. I know there's like a guilt. I feel like I have to justify it. And it's to me, it's like so much more meaningful to go for a walk in person than to sit on the phone.
Absolutely. And then, Kat, where can people learn more about you, learn more about your book, learn more about In-Stride Health, all those things?
So to learn more about In-Stride Health, you can go to the In-Stride Health website, which is instride.health, INSTRIDE.health. And then to learn more about my book, you can look it up on Amazon. It's called Step by Step. Or you can go to, and I learned this from you, Ellie, at bookshop.org.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'll be linking in the show notes.
I love it. I'm going to be redirecting people to bookshop.org.
I'm going to definitely be ordering it from there.
Go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on today's episode, Kat. It was so great to chat and to hear about your days.
Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.